Hello, my name is Brent Frayne. I'm the host for Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. Check out the PWD podcast on your favorite app, Spotify, you can do Google search. You can do so many ways and just search for your favorite show and watch when it's convenient to you. Today, I have Syntheticus Canadiensis joining me on the show. Welcome and very welcome to have you join me today. How are you?
I am great. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. There's so much to dive into regarding legislative poverty in Canada, and how it affects Canadians with disabilities on the day-to-day lived experience. And having you share your story with me is so welcome.
Maybe before we launch into the actual show, we'll spend 2 minutes just to talk about, because we did put a post on that you and I are both leaving Twitter, and
yes.
We'll spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes explaining that, and not much more. But I wanted to at least mention that because maybe people will notice that going forward, I'm not going to mention any. We're not going to have. I used to put people's handles on the bottom of their photos and things like that, but going forward, because I'm divesting myself of Twitter and so are you, we're not going to be putting Twitter handles anymore under people's names. We're just going to put the name, and even in the outro I used to put your Twitter handle and my Twitter handle. That's gone now too. Instead, you'll notice going forward, we're just going to have your email address, my email address, and the YouTube channel name, and that's it. So we're really divesting ourselves of Twitter, and we'll spend 2 minutes. You could explain briefly what's happening there, just so people are aware.
Sure. Thanks, Neil. So to my viewers and my listeners, effective September 30th, 2023, I have made the ultimate decision, and it didn't come easy. Very heart-wrenching decision to leave Twitter. I will be deactivating my account as of tomorrow. So anyone watching today, today's the 29th of September. The reason why I'm actually doing that, I'm actually following suit with what Neil has made that decision. I've actually made that decision also, but the reason why...
Sonia has...
Java Beans has actually already deactivated her account. The reason why it's policies regarding X, Twitter X. I still call it Twitter because that's what it is. We just say what it is, and that's what it was.
It's almost nothing anymore.
Well, the way it's going, there's going to be a lot of people jumping ship, and I'm not here to trash Twitter like Elon Musk. No, that's what I'm doing. The reason why is, for me personally, I don't feel like I want to have my biometric data stored in some other foreign area. And so, for me, I just made that decision.
They're talking about eyeball scans and all the,
face scans.
Scary shit now. That's next level shit. So it's like, I want no part of that.
They want to store your phone number, your email address, and they want your photo ID too, Neil. They want photo ID.
Yeah.
I know. I'm doing that. Like, what is it? A government agency? That's fine. I can understand that. But this is for Elon. No.
No.
So I made that decision. And it was a hard decision, right? Because I have a lot of followers. I have a lot of people who've been interacting with our show. And so I guess my message I have out to my listeners and followers here, and people listening later on in the podcast, please keep in touch with the podcast here. If you want to join on as a guest on the show, just like my current guest I have joining us today, reach out to myself. You can reach out to weatherman.langley@gmail.com. That's my email address. Or you can reach out to Neil's address, which he will provide to you in just a moment.
Yeah.
And then he'll tell you the link for the show. Definitely. It's moving forward. This is what we're doing. The show's always come to YouTube anyway, so that's nothing different. And people can still send their comments in. They'll be able to call into the show because we do have that added feature. We just have to get it now going. So we'll talk about that too in the show.
Yeah, well, like
your email address.
I know, and you know that you have a lot of loyal followers on Twitter because you developed a fairly big base on Twitter.
I did.
But this isn't about trying to piss people off. This is about
definitely not.
This is about feeling violated, that our privacy is being violated, and I don't want any part of it. And so I told you that I was doing this, and then you're saying, well, maybe it's a good idea. So both you and Sonia are also stepping back from it as well.
Definitely, I don't want any part of his policy going forward. And it's a shame because Twitter was actually a very good platform when it first started. Before Elon Musk took over and decided to change policies, then you have to start verifying users that you're following too. I saw that. I was like, well, okay, what's going on here? Then I saw that message yesterday. So that was it on that. So what was Neil? What was your email? The contact email for people to reach out to?
My email is it's neil.jm.nm@gmail.com, and we're gonna have, like I said, instead of on the old outros or the relatively new outros that we've been doing, I've been putting the Twitter handles at the end of the video. But going forward, instead of the Twitter handles now, I'm just going to have the email addresses. So at the end of every video, there'll be the email addresses, and so that's how you can get a hold of me and Brent. And also, as I've said lots of times already now, if you just go over to my web page, it's daddybentlinks.com. There's actually a media page or a media tab on my website that says, do you want to be on the show? And you can click there, and you just enter in, even if it's just a show idea. You don't even have to be a guest. You can just submit a show idea, hit send, and it goes directly to me that way as well. And that's a way to stay connected as well to the show.
Awesome. And who wants to be the next star? And today,
right now it's Syntheticus, because we've wasted enough time on Elon Musk. So let's start the show now.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you again for joining us, and definitely, we can have you back on again for another segment. Definitely. How are you?
All right, I'm pretty good today. It's a nice blue sky, sunny day here in Metro Vancouver, so I guess it's pretty nice. I'm in a pretty good day today, or pretty good mood today, I guess, for the most part. How is everybody else doing today?
Good.
Really good. It's actually nice and sunny in Victoria, BC here. Definitely a little breeze, but it's actually really nice. Definitely fall is now setting in. You can definitely tell the difference of especially.
You can feel it.
The acorn falling up the trees now too. As long as one doesn't hit me in the head, that's all. That would.
But you wanted to talk about the struggle on PWD social assistance here in BC, and so
absolutely.
Let's launch into that. Your personal experience, your personal story about that.
All right. Well, I have been on the provincial disability system for basically my entire adult life. And I've basically been receiving the allotted provincial amount, which is, when I first started receiving it, was as little as $906 a month. Today it's better than it used to be at like 15.35, but when you take into account inflation, it's barely above that. So it's not necessarily it's not a fantastic existence. I'm fairly lucky because I qualify for a specific housing program that prevents me from ending up in a situation where I could wind up, sleeping in a tent on East Hastings or something. So I'm not exactly. I know that I'm in a certain level of privilege where a lot of people in my position are not. And so I've, for the last 10 years or so, been very preoccupied with seeing how the provincial and federal disability systems exist in this country, and have been preoccupied with fighting to improve them, to make them better for people, because the reality is that the current system, as it is in place, leaves a lot of people behind, and a lot of people fall through the cracks, including, although I did say I am fortunate, I include myself here. As earlier this year, my sister and I were living with a roommate, and there was I won't get into the details about it because I would rather not, but I'll just state that it didn't end well, and my sister and I basically were thrown out of that housing situation in the middle of burgeoning housing crisis here in Metro Vancouver and Canada entirely. So the ability to afford a place to live was completely out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to relocate to our grandparents' place. And my grandfather is 82. And it wasn't really necessarily fair that we had to, take up space, and he had to take us on as a responsibility, but we didn't have a choice. And right now, my sister is still with him, but I haven't really been able to find work or an apartment of my own. And so I worry about what happens if my grandfather were to, say, pass in the future, because I'm all my sister really has to rely on. And the reality is that the social safety net in BC has been completely inadequate at meeting the needs of my sister and I. And we haven't really been able to get back on our feet, even though it's been almost 10 months now.
Yeah, with us, it's really heart-wrenching to hear, because so many people are going through it, and I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and you shouldn't have to, because the system is failing you. The system is set to fail so many people, and it doesn't need to be that way.
It's set that way on purpose, deliberately.
Yeah.
We need to stress that point. Yeah.
Yes, because the system, the way back in the early 1990s, Syntheticus is they used to have pensions for disabled people, and it was stripped away by a government at the time who felt that that they need just people. I guess people with disabilities. I don't even know.
Mike Harcourt.
Okay.
Actually, before
I've got
Mike
a question.
Harcourt.
Yeah.
So I do not quite have a huge understanding of the history of the welfare state in Canada beyond very basic understanding. That that pension system you mentioned, was that a provincial or federal program?
Provincial.
It was provincial, yeah.
All right.
And I believe they changed it. I believe it was 1990. I believe that's when they started to scrap that, and
Wow.
and then the Mike Harcourt thing where he stood up and he said everybody
cheats, ferments, and stuff like that. Yeah.
And deadbeats.
When
he clawed back everything, that was for 3 or 4 years after that. But his comment was kind of the nail in the coffin, and everything kind of went down the shitter after that, right?
Yeah.
If I do recall my reading of Canadian political history correctly, I believe that what first initially happened was that correct me if I'm wrong, because I might not be entirely correct here, but the federal government started slashing budgets in the 90s, and a lot of those transfers went to the provinces, and provinces wound up cutting it as well because they couldn't make up the shortfall.
That's exactly it. I was following a lot of the advocacy stuff on there. I had a whole site, Syntheticus, and it gave me the whole breakdown of every single province and why legislation was put into place, what their policy was of their agendas, and poof, it just disappeared. I couldn't access it anymore. It was gone. It's like, it was probably embarrassing for the government. They didn't want people to read it anymore. But I kept it in the mind, right? And when I was
And
doing more, yeah, go
it
ahead.
almost feels to me like a lot of our understanding of Canada and what we think this country is, especially with regards to how we compare with the States and other countries, seems to be based on a consensus that existed prior to the 1990s, and people still haven't really
Yeah.
updated the reality of the
Yeah.
present.
No,
Status quo.
I grew up. I'll show my age, but I grew up late '60s, early '70s is when I was basically a kid, and like the '70s and '80s. I mean, that was kind of the heyday of Canada,
Hmm.
and then you get to the, remember Expo '86. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was really the top to
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Like I have really fond memories of that year and thinking, because as a disabled person going to Expo '86, I was there I went down there every day. I had a year pass. I went down there every day. Ate at McDonald's because it was it was the cheapest thing to do is go down to McBarge and eat at
Yeah. Yeah.
McDonald's, right? And
Yeah.
but yeah, and remember that Rick Hansen had his Man in Motion tour. It wrapped
Yeah.
up a year later in '87. So you kind of thought that things are looking up. Things are going to look up for people with disabilities, but in actual fact, everything went to shit after Expo '86 and 1987. You thought that Rick Hansen leaving his mark, doing the Globe tour thing, would have made a difference. It actually, everything went to shit after that, because for whatever reason, the government started to think, oh, we can just start donating like $1 million checks to Rick Hansen, and that's enough. That's all we have to do. Remember
Well, I mean,
they gave him
Yeah.
they gave him the $1 million check and they said, "What? That's job done. That's all we need to do." And everything was walked back after that. It felt like to me,
Mhm.
I don't know.
well, I would like to
Yeah, go ahead.
jump in on that and mention
Yeah.
something, because, like you mentioned, that for some reason governments changed course, and I mean, but I'm a political person. I'm fairly left leaning for reasons that are both material and also because I just believe in a better society. Like, I believe in a just society. And Pierre Trudeau said Canada needed to be a just society. Like, I believe that strongly. Anyway, so what happened, and this tracks perfectly, because what happened starting in the 1980s throughout the Western world was the rise of what we now call neoliberalism, which was the idea that the market could solve everything and that the government just needs to butt out and get out of the way. And that's basically what happened. And so government started slashing all these programs and everything because the ideology of the day was the market will do everything.
Mhm.
And we're now paying the price of that, of 30, 40 years of that ideology being dominant in government policy. And the unfortunate reality is, I'm not opposed to the concept of capitalism or the free market. I generally think that those are, on average, good things. But I do think that the fundamental misunderstanding here is that there are always going to be people that are not going to be able to compete in that market. And
Yeah.
disabled people are examples of people that often cannot compete in that market.
Well,
Yeah.
the federal government, like we've talked before too, is the federal government got out of housing as well. They basically turned.
Deregulated.
Yeah, and they gave the keys. They gave the keys away to all of the billionaires and said, well, the billionaires will take care of it or whatever, right?
Well, and that's
And
why
that has been a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's happening now. It's decades and decades of inaction, and then wait till a crisis comes and says, "Oh, uh-oh," and now they're all pointing fingers at each other, going, "No, no, it's your fault. It's your fault." And the rates and the housing, and we got like a medical crisis across the country. You name it. I mean, all these crises is going on. And in the rates, like the PWD rates, when the shelter, in my view, I mean, I want your view on it too, if you want. But I don't think
Okay.
it should even be in the equation. Like, it should
We
just be a
have
one flat.
We have a comment from Eva Flightless Birdie in the chat.
Oh,
She's
oh,
joined
oh,
the
wow.
chat. So
Hello.
yeah,
Oh.
and her comment is the messaging being used to rationalize to the public why governments would be going forward deeming people unworthy of support was and still is terrible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a level of infantilization that the government
Very true.
language is often directed at those who need the help, and dehumanization as well. For example, anyone who's on provincial disability assistance of some kind, they find it difficult to have a relationship because then if they do, they can lose their benefits because the person that they're now with, if that person isn't disabled, for example, the government now views that person to be their responsibility, which is a whole other horrible thing. Because what if the person they date turns out to be an abuser? Now they're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's been
yeah, and you always talk about the bathroom paths metaphor too. I was like, can I pretty please go to the washroom, right?
Yeah,
and that's how the whole system is set up. Can I pretty please?
Like, can I pretty please leave the province for 30 days? Because it has permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you need permission? You need to go. Like, you shouldn't have to ask permission. And like the rates, Synthetica. So back in 1989, a little bit of history here. The shelter rate was $2.75. In February of 1992, it went up to $3.25. It then stayed unchanged, until April 1st, 2007. So it jumped from 1992 all the way to 2007. It finally went up to $3.25, from $3.25 to $3.75, and it stayed there. It stayed there from 2007 all the way till current, and now it only increased to certain individuals. If you didn't show that your rent increased above $3.75, then you got no increase. So it only
I've got a very hot take on that.
Yes, definitely.
I think the shelter allowance shouldn't exist. That doesn't mean the money should go away.
Yes.
But I don't think there should be a shelter allowance at all.
Yes.
I think they
100%.
should just have an amount of money that they give you, and that's that. I have noticed in the last few years there's been a lot of advocacy, especially in the spaces related to PWD, about how the shelter rates were too low. And I've always thought this was an odd thing to be worried about. I says, well, shouldn't the worry be that the rates themselves are too low? Why even have a shelter allowance when that's never going to be enough to cover rents anyway?
Yeah, and I echo that all the time, and that's one thing that I mentioned to the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction is having RGI, rent geared to income. So it just be based on your income, and they need to just get rid of that shelter because I know, and I don't want to pick other provinces like like say BC against Ontario or Alberta or whatever, because I know Ontario, they have the same system set up. It's almost like they copy each other. Well, you're doing it, so we can do it. But Alberta, they don't even have the shelter. It's like you get your check, then you pay your rent, and that's how it works.
I'm going to give Alberta a lot of credit, and I'm going to give them a lot of respect here because they might not have been necessarily voting the parties I want, but for some reason they've been much better on disability issues than many other parts of the country. And I just find that surprising, but good at the same time,
Well, let's back up.
$1,800. Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit again, Brent, because it bears repeating. It bears stressing. You said 1990. It was $2.75. And they just changed it now from $3.75 to $500. So that means it's 30 years. 30 years it went up $100. 30 years. So that means $3 a year. $3 a year if you do the math. I mean, I'm pretty good at doing math, right? With small numbers. With small numbers, I can do it. So that's $100 in 30 years. That's $3 a year. That's disgusting. Disgusting.
It is. It's totally disgusting, Neil, because the average rent, when your rent is higher, you're going to get that percentage each year that the government has imposed on landlords. So if it's 2%, if it's 2.5, this year is 2%. Next year it's 3.5%. Now, I remember years ago, as Syntheticus would remember this too, where there was times where rent was going up like 4.5%. I remember that.
It was inflation plus 2%.
Yeah,
was
yeah,
was the criteria they used.
The reason why why that was in place was the one of the formulas was there so that landlords would do uptakes of their buildings, and the other part would be covering their costs, right? So, in a lot of these buildings, they haven't been kept up. It was more of a cash grab. I rented from a corporate landlord, and at one place, and the manager actually told me that they would just keep that money for like the whole year, and they'd go on vacation, and they would never do anything on the building. I'm like, wow.
And again, I mean, I've mentioned this a few times before in other podcasts, but again, it bears repeating. You know, when the pandemic hit, and I mean, I'm not going to minimize the truth of what happened in the pandemic. You know, a lot of people lost their lives, and I'm not going to minimize that, okay? Because I know that a lot of people died. But I will say, you know, when you had the health officer standing up in front of the cameras and saying, you know, isn't it sad that we lost, like, you know, 4 or 5 people today, you know, from COVID? And yeah, that's sad. But then you have, like, think of the heat dome and all those people in those unsafe houses that lost their lives by cooking themselves to death
because they had no air conditioner.
And I mean, and all the people, like hundreds and hundreds of people that are dying every year on the streets because of they're malnourished, they're unsafe, they're living in unsafe situations, they're being abused.
Living conditions on top of that.
You know, I'm wearing my orange shirt today. We should have mentioned Truth and Reconciliation Day is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Officially.
Yes.
That is true. It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm wearing my orange shirt one day early in recognition of all the murdered children and women. Yeah. And so we should acknowledge that too. But you know, the same thing that happened to the indigenous community used to happen back in the 60s and 70s or you know, earlier even, to all of the disabled community too. Like we were institutionalized and abused, and there's a lot of histories of sexual abuse happening in the institutionalized disability community back in the 60s, 70s, that went on as well.
Yeah, and you notice that the government never likes to talk about that part.
Yeah.
And I don't want to peg Indigenous, the
no, not at all. Not at all. I'm wearing my orange shirt proudly here. I'm just.
I'm glad that we're pointing that out though, because it's very important too to recognize that all the issues that happen for decades and decades, and it's just everything's all been swept under the carpet. It's like saying, yeah, nothing to see here, folks. Everything's all great. All the citizens are taken care of. No, we're not.
They're not being taken care of now.
And that's the key point is that going forward it's holding the governments accountable. It doesn't matter what government's in power. It all comes down to policies, and and I'm glad that we're talking about. It doesn't matter who's in power. It's about it's about policies about increasing rates, and kudos to Alberta. I'm glad that, you mentioned that, Syntheticus. Alberta, they've really increased the rates, and it was actually under a different government. Who did that?
Alison Redford in 2012 increased the rates from $11.88 to $15.88 in 1 year.
I remember that when I was reading that, and I had called the government on that right away, and I said, how come the other government can do it and ours can't? And you know what I was told back in 2012? I was told there's more to do. And now we're in 2023, and I keep hearing that same line.
There's more to do. Yeah.
There's more to do. And to me, that's like just kicking the can down the road because there's more to do. Yeah, we'll deal with it later. in order to reduce down poverty, you don't push it forward saying there's more to do later on. How
You
about do it now?
you sent me a link a couple of days ago, Brent, and it was about a poverty report card. Remember?
Oh
And yeah,
yes, yeah.
and
Yeah. Let's dive into that.
BC got a D plus.
D plus.
D
Oh my
plus
God.
for BC. Yeah.
But I thought we're supposed to be leading the country economically.
Yeah. Apparently not.
Yeah, and I think the Maritimes you got F.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, who was leading? Was it Alberta? Like,
I think it was
how
Alberta.
does,
Yeah.
Alberta.
if we're
Actually,
at a D plus,
and Quebec, of course, because Quebec
Quebec was actually
does their
leading, I
own,
think.
their own thing.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
which is interesting because I've actually done research into Quebec, because if I were to leave BC, any other province I'd want to live in would probably be Quebec. So I did research on this. I'd get less money there. I'd get less support.
Mm.
I've actually looked into it. The amount of money that they offer the disabled community there is worse.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Hmm.
Yeah. Alberta.
Also,
seems
you can't. BC also does one thing great that a lot of other provinces don't. And also, I'm going to give credit. Alberta also does this too, but it's slightly different, but basically the same thing. If you get disability in BC, you're able to work and earn a not insignificant amount of money. Like, I've done the math, and the reality is that if I can find a part-time job and work the 20 hours a week that I am able to work, my monthly income would rise from $1,535 to like almost $2,800 after tax. And $2,800 is not bad, actually.
Yeah.
The problem is that is reliant on you being able to one, work, two, be able to find work, and three, being able to hold it. And those are three things that many people in the disabled community are not able to do.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm generally lucky that if I can find a job and I can hold it, because I am able to work mostly, that I can get out of poverty quite easily. But a lot of people in my situation, they don't have that option. They can't work. They don't have that alternative income.
And
Yeah.
my problem with everything, and Brent knows where I'm going with this, is that I did work for 20 years, and I have a previous wife, and so I got a survivor's pension, and the government, though the provincial government, claused that back as unearned income. So that's where my problem is. Like, I worked for 20 years, and I paid into all this stuff, and
You get penalized for it.
and then they say, well, you worked, but you didn't really work. You didn't really earn your survivor's pension, so we'll just take that away, because having a dead spouse that's not really an inconvenience at all. So we'll just take that away, and that's what I have a problem with.
It's ghoulish.
It's
really.
sick.
Yeah,
sick,
it's really sick. Yeah.
And it's hurting the people the most that need the most. They claw it off, and in my view, I don't any clawback shouldn't even exist anywhere in Canada on provincial programs at all. Even federal, like federal or provincial, there should be no clawback.
Well, you guys remember when the CERB during the pandemic, and most provinces, they clawed that back. Like, if you were on disability and you lost your job because of the pandemic, and you qualified for the CERB, in many provinces, if you collected that, you lost your provincial assistance, and now we're reliant on the CERB. Now, here in BC, we were pretty good, and we let you keep it. I know this because I fell into that. I lost my job at the start of the pandemic, and I qualified for CERB right off the bat. And I was worried about it at the time. I was like, am I going to be able to keep this? Is the provincial government going to take it? And in the end, the provincial government didn't take it. And for a solid period of time, because I couldn't find work for a while, my monthly income was quite high thanks to that, because I was getting both the provincial disability and the CERB. Now, one can ask whether that is necessarily, something that should have happened. Maybe it might have been a little more generous. Maybe I didn't need that amount of money. But at the same time, for a brief moment in time, I got to feel what it was like to have a government that didn't treat me like crap.
Right.
And I just got to say that that was life-changing at that time period.
Oh,
I could
huge.
afford to do things that I wasn't able to do before.
Well,
I was able to upgrade my old decaying computer that was 10 years old. I was able to replace my TV that was failing. I was able to eat properly. I was able to, like, it was a massive improvement on my quality of life. And like, again, I'm fully understanding that I probably didn't need that much, just based on the idea, like, because my income actually went up prior to when I was working.
you
Mhm.
know,
And so I probably didn't need that. But at the same time, I got to experience what it would
What
have been
it's like
like.
yeah.
to,
What
to
it's
me,
like to have that much more money, yeah.
yeah, to me, it's interesting that you said that again because immediately as soon as you said it's the first time like that I don't feel like crap. I mean, I'll go back again to Expo '86, and this might seem like I'm taking a bit of a leap here, but I have a point. Is like Expo '86 was so disability centric.
Oh, huge, yeah.
I don't know if you remember, Brent, but I mean, if you were disabled and going to Expo '86, you were treated like frickin' royalty. Like
Oh, yeah.
they rolled out the red carpet for you like big time. I don't know how many times like I went I got to like go to VIP like lounges and have like juice and cookies and stuff, like have my own individual shows. Like they would pull people out of lineups. Like they would look and see if you were in a wheelchair on crutches and they pull you out of the lineup
Yeah.
and say, go
Oh,
ahead
yeah.
and go ahead of
I
the
re-
show. And you get private showings. I mean, the whole expo was set up so disability centric. And I mean, that's why I loved going. I went every day because it's like, I felt like a freaking rock star. And who did that? It was Jimmy Patterson and everybody that ran the show there. I mean, they must have drilled it down. I was like, if somebody with a disability comes to the expo, you treat them like a freaking rock star. And I did. I felt like a freaking rock star every day I went there. I felt like a rock star. And I mean, when do we get the chance to feel like that? Never.
You are a rock star.
Yeah, but the government doesn't make you feel that way.
No, no. And that's, a good point on it. And I remember also that back in the pandemic too, where there was a gentleman at a place that I was living at in Langley, Syntheticus, and he was collecting the CERB too, and he kept telling me, "Brent, go and apply for it. I mean, the government's not going to take it off." I said, "Oh, yes, they will." "No, they won't. Not in BC." So I didn't collect it. We were getting that supplement, the $300 supplement that the government had put
Yeah.
in, and we were
I remember
advocating.
that.
Yeah, and we were advocating so hard on that. Sonia and I were advocating big time. We had the news come and talk to us about it. Like, what would happen if the government took it away? Like, say they took it away today or tomorrow. I said, what would happen? I said, well, wouldn't be able to eat healthy. And I think they asked Sonia the question, what would happen if they took it away, the $300? What would happen, Sonia?
We'd have to move.
Yeah, if you heard what she said, we would have to move. And so they asked me, well, the same thing. You would have to move? Like, what would happen? I said, we would have to give up our place that we live in right now. We would have to sacrifice that, and because we couldn't afford the high rent. He said, so that $300 made a huge difference in your life. I go, well, it is making a huge difference. I said, I really hope they don't take it away. Well, what I didn't know at the time was the government had already made that decision. The government had made that decision that they were going to be taking away no less than 50%, but possibly giving back another 25%. And I was told at the time, I mean, I can say it now, but I was told at the time what the decision was on that and going forward. So they were going to be giving back $175 of the $300 going forward, because a lot of the disabled community, we all caused such an uproar, rallies, 300 to live. Sonia and I were involved with that campaign. And going forward, we're going to be pushing for the $300 that was initially taken away, because the government actually in the budget, they only gave like a $175 increase just last year. Isn't that funny how, yeah.
I was actually really surprised by that, to be honest. I honestly thought that it was such an easy win for the government just to keep that, like, and then when they basically took it away and then said they were going to give you back 175, I was just like, why?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this just doesn't make sense to me. Like, this was such a policy win in terms of like good optics from the it's not like they were lobbyists trying to take it away. Like, I don't know, I didn't understand why they did it.
This comes across like a shell game, right, where they just move the shells around.
Yeah.
And say, you know?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, so I mean, I went to our corporate landlord we were renting from, and the landlord says, "You told me that this is the amount that you're getting," and I said, "Yeah." Well, the ministry gave me a form. It was an official form. This is your entitlement. Your entitlement per month, and it was based at 15.15. It said right on there, 15.15. And I thought, oh, so she goes, so that would be plenty to rent here. I said, so if I didn't have that $300, you still would have rented to me? Oh yeah, for sure. I would have rented to you, but I know that financially it would have made it a lot more tight for you to make it by on high market rent. And I go, right. So if I knew that, I wouldn't have rented here because I knew that it would put us in a bad spot. And she goes, so it's going to put you in a bad spot now, right? They're going to take it away. I go, yeah, we're going to have to move. And the manager freaked. Right. She goes, so she was pissed off. She goes, the government can't do that. I go, they can and they will do that. They're that cruel. They don't care. She said, that is wrong. And I said, she goes, it's an NDP government. I said, I don't care what government it is. They don't care. I mean, we've been advocating. And so what I found out, Syntheticas, is that there's a report that was done in January 28th of 2021. There was a basic income pilot project that was going to be done. And however, the government decided not to go with it because it was only going to go to a certain designation amount of disabled people in BC. And the government at the time, the minister, Minister Simpson at the time, felt that that wouldn't be good because it was only going to go to certain people and everybody else wasn't going to get it as a pilot project. So he said, no, that's not going to happen. But in that report, it did state then, so they concluded that there was 3 people on a panel that said, okay, one says a basic income, no. Another one, basic income, no. The other one said, yes, it's a good idea. But they went with the 2 no, and so it overruled it. So the minister still had the final say so. But what in that report...
I remember reading that, though.
Yeah.
I remember reading that report, and in that report, there was a lot of things there about like how instead of bringing in a universal basic income, that what they could do is they could just boost the social support programs.
Yeah, and actually
to make it so that like it's more fair.
Yeah, because in that report, it was actually there was some top items that were actually top of the list, and one was modernizing the social safety net, right? Raising the rates up. There was something to do rent, something to do with rent too. They were kind of they weren't too focused on, but I think I'm really hoping that they're going to get rid of that shelter, right? But the other part too was it said the part that really stood out to me the most in there was bringing back the $300 and making it permanent. And I thought, wow. Mm-hmm. And now when that report came out, they had, so obviously that told me they've already made that decision, the $300 in 2021, and we were still living where we were living. And they only brought back part of it. And so these cruel decisions that when government makes, and they already know the answer to it, it really affects people's lives. Like, what you've gone through too, what you're going through, decision making based on government policies at the time, where government will always have an excuse. Well, we're going to come up with a new computer system in 2 years. Okay, well, what are you going to do in the meantime? Give a little pittance, as Sonia would say, little pittance, meaning, and I always say breadcrumbs. She calls it pittance. And I say, well, you follow those little breadcrumbs because eventually it's going to add up to a whole bunch. But over how many decades is it going to take to pile those breadcrumbs up?
Yeah, and we're all in BC here, so we all know about the bus pass, right? The bus pass clawback as well. That. I mean, that was messed up as well because Stillwell, like Michelle Stillwell, she went with the advice of 5 people
Yeah.
She went to her insiders of it was literally 5 people, and 5 people said it's an unfair system. So she shut the whole thing down and said, you know what? It's helping 99.9% of the population, but because my 5 people say it sucks, I'm gonna change it.
To change the whole system,
and it's just so stupid. She catered the entire decision based on 5 votes versus 99.9% of the population that said, "Hey, it's a good idea."
The special transportation subsidy for the rural areas, she took it away, and they all got one lump sum where they could go and pay for a car insurance. They could go and pay a family friend. Hey, here's a lump sum. You can take me wherever I need to go. Now, we're going to give everybody $52. And so there was fairness and equity in the system, apparently.
Equity in the system, I love that, yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. But hey, you can have 52, but you want a bus pass? Yeah, you can't have the money. You can have a bus pass, but
so you can either have a bus pass or you can eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you can't do both. You can either eat or you can have a bus pass. What do you want?
I remember the time where when the one government was in. Remember they $77.
Yeah.
And then it was $52.
Yeah, and it was technically a $25 raise at the time.
Yeah. It was a show.
It went from $9.06 to $9.31. It's like, wow, thank you very much, Christy Clark. Fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a shell game, really, and it backfired on them. And so when the current government got in back in 2017, the first thing was they were going to restore that bus pass. I was on them right away. I had reporters contact me. Did they restore the bus pass? I go, no, they did not. They did not restore it back to its original $45 a year bus pass. Well, they told me that they did. I go, well, they told you something that's not true, because if that was the case, they would have one form.
The seniors have it. The seniors have it. But
the seniors have it. Same pass.
Yeah, all they did was raise the rates by $52 that December, I think it was, to make up for the bus pass. It was like, oh yeah, your bus pass is back. Here's $52 to cover the bus pass only.
It's still like a choice of, do you want your bus pass or do you want to eat? Do you want your bus pass or rather than just give everybody a bus pass and say there's no either or.
Yeah, because if you opt out of it,
get rid of the either or and just give people a bus pass, and then it's not a choice of, do you want a bus pass or do you want to eat? Because that's just messed up too.
Yeah, because if you opt out of that bus pass and take the money and then say halfway through the month, you know what, I changed my mind, I want that bus pass, you got to wait over a month before they actually reinitiate it back in again. Mm-hmm. It's really messed up. You can take one taxi, like to and from, it's $52, depending on how far you travel. Now you can't travel for the rest of the month. You don't get that 52. Now you're really messed up, even worse. Yeah. But the government looks at it as, well, we're giving them a choice, $52.
So you can afford one. You can afford one trip to the food bank, maybe.
So that's it. That's one haul.
And that's it. Yep.
Yeah, it's just we can criticize the current provincial NDP a lot, and there are examples of things that I generally would, but I look at them and then I look at the government before them, and I don't have a short memory. I remember how much the BC Liberals, not really, but that's what they call themselves, but at the time, I remember how they treated me and how they treated people that were vulnerable. And I know that the BC NDP, they're not necessarily adequate enough, but they're still at least giving something.
Yeah, the ones. Because I remember Syntheticus that the other government, whatever they want to call themselves, it used to be the BC Liberals, now it's the BC United Party. But hey, we changed the name. It's all better. But the polls now show they're like so far down. But I don't really follow too much on the polls because things can change, whatever, right? But I remember the cruelty that they put disabled people through about being reassessed to see if you're still disabled. And I was one of them that they put through. There was a whole slew of them.
That was back in 2002 with.
It was right when we had a bus strike at the time.
Yeah. Gordon Campbell.
Yeah, my doctor's office phoned me up and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" Because I said, "Well, apparently I got a form. I got to get you to re-sign to see if I'm still disabled." Why? What happened, Brent? Did you didn't tell the doctor that that's something changed? I go, well, I don't know. I didn't. My disabilities didn't go away, did they? She goes, disabilities don't go away, Brent. I go, well, according to the government. So they put me through a lot of rigmarole. I had to go months with no income, like zero income. I lost my job at the time that I was working at because I couldn't do the job. I went to apply for another job. I couldn't do the job. Like it was frustration, anxiety, stress. They caused me PTSD at the time. Like you name it. Like it was not good. My doctor yelled and screamed at them, ran to do lawsuits against them, civil lawsuits. Oh, he had all the paperwork done up. He has lawyers involved, and next thing I had two ladies at my door saying, "Hey, you've been reassessed, and you're back on the system, and here's a check for you, because we retroactive it back." Meanwhile, I was renting from a friend's sister and brother-in-law, and the lady was actually on maternity leave, so they were very low on income. The guy was working, doing computer programming at a computer programming firm in Vancouver. So they only had one income, and they relied on our income coming in to basically pay for their mortgage. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? 3 months. I'm sorry, Brent has no money to pay. I told the government that you're putting me in a bad spot. You're putting these other people in a bad spot. If they lose their home, they can't pay their mortgage. Guess what? So what? We're all going to be on the street.
Dan makes a really good point in chat here. It's Birdie and Dan are having a little conversation, and Dan makes a great point. He says that the MLAs and MPs, but the MLAs here have a $2,500 a month housing allowance, right? And so Dan says that they should, all the MLAs here should trade their $2,500 housing allowance with the people on PWD income assistance, and so they should have their $500 allowance, and we can have the $2,500 allowance.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah,
I say yes to that.
I think that would go a long way.
I think it would. I think it changed people's lives in a positive way.
That would fix things.
Make choices and definitely. I totally echo that. There's so many changes.
All right, so I guess this is supposed to go on until about 3 o'clock, so it's 12:51. I wanted to.
We can do a wrap up comments now if you want. Yeah.
I wanted to give a few of my solutions for what I think needs to be done to fix it. Yeah. All right. To start with, I'm curious how much of the obviously I'm not in the room with the provincial government, so I don't know how much this is a degree, but in 2021, the federal Liberals did technically run for re-election with promising the Canada disability benefit. I wonder if that had any impact on the provincial government's decision to not increase rates by $300.
I'm sure it did.
I think that really had a huge impact on it. I do know, just to kind of summarize it, is a lot of the transfer payments, regardless if it's from the social safety net, healthcare, you name it, they haven't been handled over to the provinces adequately enough. I know that the BC Premier at the time, the former predecessor, Mr. John Horgan, he had advocated really hard with the federal government to have transfer payments over enough for healthcare, because if you don't give enough on the PWD benefits, it puts strain on the healthcare, which now puts strain on the system, right? So it really makes a huge difference not having those transfer payments. So I really do, I agree with you. I really do think that that the decisions that are made federally have a huge impact on the provinces.
All right, so then my thoughts on this are simply the following. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Canada Disability Benefit will become a thing. I don't know how generous it will be or things like that, but I do believe that the federal government and the provincial governments are discussing this. So I am cautiously optimistic. In saying that, I don't think that having an additional federal program is necessarily the right way to go. I do think I'm grateful that that's what they're going to do. But what I want to see the federal government do is that since they already give transfers to the provinces for social programs, what they should do is Ottawa should sit down with all the provinces and say, here, I'm going to set minimum standards for what disability income should be, for what disability support should be. And if some provinces are not able to meet that, then the federal government will cover the additional required amount. But basically, the problem right now is with the current system in place and with Canada's current separation of powers and our confederation system or whatever.
Yep.
One province is scared to raise rates too much over another one because then they'll have a surge in applicants from out of province moving there. Basically, our current system results in a race to the bottom. The same reason why it's been difficult to raise the minimum wage until recently, because if one province raised the minimum wage too much, then now they're going to be out of sync with the rest of the provinces, and that might lead to a lower competitiveness or blah, 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 whatever business lobbyists will try to argue. Yeah. This is why a very unpopular opinion in this country for some reason, but I think the federal government needs more powers, not less. They need to set national disability standards. They need to set national minimum wage standards. They need to be able to set national labor standards, because leaving it up to the provinces literally just results in a race to the bottom. And that's what we've seen over the last several decades.
Yeah, in my take on that, it's more like a unison across, harmonized across, so that each province will be synchronized. And yeah, like you mentioned, is that if one province can't seem to, kind of deal with it, with the adequate rates, then the federal government's now going to top up that province so that everyone's now going to be bumped up to that level.
And if a province decides to not abide by it, then the federal government should use its fiscal capacity to punish that province. Kind of like how they technically do with the healthcare system. So if a province, for example, tries to privatize medicine, then the federal government can be like, okay, then you're not getting any money from us. Similar things should exist for things like disability assistance or things like that. For example, if a province says, screw you, we're not going to help our disabled citizens, then the federal government should be like, okay, then we're not going to give you any transfers.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, it's like the seniors, the senior supplement, right? The same thing. Like it's a guaranteed amount, so that seniors, regardless of where they are in the country, they're getting that guaranteed amount.
Birdie says the feds could choose to be the adults in the room.
Yeah, no, totally.
They could. Yeah. It doesn't feel like it right now, but they could be, yes.
Well, yeah, there's so many positive changes definitely that need to be done, and I encourage people to contact their local MLAs, their MPs, their MPPs, wherever you are in the country. Definitely let them know how you feel about the social safety net with whatever province that you're in. I do know that a couple of the maritime provinces, they don't even have a disability rate, which is disgusting. Do you not recognize your citizens for having a disability?
I lived in Newfoundland for 6 months back in 2012, and I relied on the welfare system there. They don't have a disability system. What they do is they just have a welfare system. So basically, if you need money from the government, they'll give you like $800, and that's that.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Probably more now, but I don't know the modern rates. It's been a long time.
Yeah. It's a lot of things need to change, and what we can do is just gather up as a community and let our voices be heard. Unison.
I want to say one last thing before we finish up here. Sure. I want to mention that my member of parliament is Carla Qualtrough.
Okay.
And that I've actually spoken to her in person about the Canada Disability Benefit, and I'll tell you what she told me. Mm-hmm. Now, I do not have it might be slightly different now that there's a different minister in charge of disability. I was actually disappointed when they shifted that, not because I necessarily think that Carla Qualtrough is doing a fantastic job, but more so just because I've lost my literal in-person ability to keep up with this stuff now, because now it's some minister out in Toronto area, I think. Anyway, what she told me is this. She wants the Canada Disability Benefit to top up provincial disability rates to $26,000 a year.
Wow.
which, so in BC, that would be, she said, akin to about $700 a month.
700.
And that's what she's aiming. That's what she was aiming. She also wants to make it in such a way that you don't get punished for working. If what she told me in person is actually what the government is considering, then this could be really good, actually. This could be a very good thing. But again, it really does depend on how serious the government is. She did say that there was dissenting opinions within the caucus. Some people wanted more, some people wanted less. So it really does depend on how much the federal government is taking this seriously. I don't think the prime minister is an evil man. I think he does understand that this is an issue. I do think that the Liberals are taking this seriously. I just think that I feel like in a lot of ways that they've been slow on it because for some reason this government has a problem with passing legislation efficiently. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, it's the disability benefit, it's the dental care program. They basically wait until the last minute to actually set out the details. And I'm not entirely sure why they do this, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Having spoken with Carla in person, I get the feeling, because she was very passionate. Like, I get the feeling she's serious. She wants this to happen. So I do have cautious optimism.
Yeah, well, they say no clawbacks, right? They're making sure that it's something that can't be clawed back. So what I'm wondering is, because I already have my survivor's pension clawed back, I'm wondering if they'll have to end all clawbacks, because I can't see the federal government saying, it's okay, right, you can keep clawing back pensions, and we'll just top up whatever you're clawing back. I can't see. I can't see the federal government signing off on that and saying, "Oh, that's fine."
Well, I think the intention is that the only thing that would not be clawed back would be the Canada Disability Benefit. So if you qualify for the National Disability Benefit, you would not have that clawed back. But I don't think that would impact how provinces can still claw things.
Yeah, that's weird to me, though, that the federal government would say, "Oh yeah, go ahead, claw back everything, and we'll just top you up whatever after you've clawed everything back." So I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me that they would sign off on that and say, "That's a good idea." I don't know.
What do you think about DERB, the Disability Emergency Relief Benefit?
I think that it's a good idea. I think that there should be, at least, if I were to give you my honest opinion, the best way I think the government could do this would be to top up the quarterly carbon tax, sales tax credit by like a certain amount of money as just an emergency amount, because that would be very difficult for provinces to claw back. Whereas if they just brought in a benefit and just said, all right, here's a monthly check for everybody, then provinces can easily claw that back. But if it's set up with the sales tax credit, it's going to be hard for them to take that away.
Yeah, they could add it to like a GST when they do quarterly payments. They could just add it to the GST each time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like something like that. Or I mean, either do it each month, or they could do it in quarterly payments. Would probably be the easiest to do it into the quarterly payments, and then a person would just have to budget that into each month accordingly. But yeah, it would probably be easier for the government, for the CRA to do that. I mean, they already have the information already. They already know who's supposed to get what. So yeah.
Now I don't think that they'll do that, sadly. But I do expect that we'll see money in the next year's budget in a few months that is going to include the disability benefit. I do think that the government is trying its hardest to get the money out the door as fast as possible. So I'm expecting that if they keep their promise, this program should be hopefully operational in either late 2024 or early 2025. I believe that that's the target. Now, that could be pushed back, and if it does, then that's where things suck, because there's an election in 2025. But I think that right now the federal government wants to build a legacy, because I think they realize that they're kind of screwed in the next election. So I'm pretty sure that they'll try and get this done, because they want to make sure they get something that they can say, look, we did this.
Otherwise,
because otherwise then they basically lose the next election and they have nothing to show for it. So I think they will, but I'm cautiously optimistic, but I have my depressive moments where I go on Twitter and basically say I don't think it's coming. But honestly, it's I do think it is based on the resources I've spoken to. I am technically a member of the Federal Liberal Party, and I've actually spoken to members of the party that are like higher up, and they are taking this seriously. So I do think it's coming, but I don't know the whole details yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, and from what I've been, hearing from, different sources, same thing. Like it's like you nailed it there. It's like the $2,200 mark, really, and that's what I was hearing from a lot of it. It's like they want to, kind of put it to that level, and that's the narrative that I was always getting too, from hearing from different different people I've had on the show too, and some of my contacts within the current NDP, so because I have some contacts there, and I've been hearing these things, and of course I don't advertise it a lot because it's all hearsay, but because a lot of this stuff is getting, as a lot of this stuff is getting talked behind the scenes, and they're working on it. They want to get it right, and sadly is that people's lives are hurting in the meantime, and that's why I think DERB is so badly needed while they work on getting this right.
No, absolutely.
And that's why it's so imperative that something has to be done.
Other than the disability benefit, I think the other thing that needs to be done is that there needs to be investment in social housing for people with disabilities.
For sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a lot of people can say, oh, well, we also need to zone our cities to allow like more units to be constructed as well. But people on disabilities, with disabilities and on disability are oftentimes uniquely incapable of competing in the private market, and they need a place to live. And it's not reasonable to tell people like me, oh, just leave BC, just leave Vancouver. Like, if you can't afford it, just leave. It's like, but this is my home. I have a right to live here.
Exactly.
I've built a life here. We can't just tell people to just move to the middle of nowhere. We have to make sure that there's resources and places for them to live within their communities.
Well, yeah, you got to make sure that they have their medical resources, everything else. Like, sure, oh, move up to Prince George. I remember the one Premier Clark. Remember, oh, if you don't like it down here, move up north. Really? Well, are you going to have transit? Are you going to have medical services? Are you going to have your grocery stores? Is it walkable? Is it accessible? Oh, probably not.
Yeah, it's definitely not. It's not.
How will my electric wheelchair handle the snowfall?
No, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly it, right? And it's all about listening to PWD lived experience, right? It's about learning from people, citizens, of what works good for us, not with what works good for government, what works good for us, and that's why they're elected officials, to listen to their citizens, their constituents. And I'm so glad that we've had this great discussion today, and I'd love to have you back on, and we can continue definitely talking a little some more.
I would very much be interested in returning in the future. I think this has been a very productive conversation. I think we've learned a lot. We've discussed many solutions. We've leaked some information about like possible future changes that could be positive. So I think from that perspective, this has been a very productive and great conversation. I thank you very much for having me on.
If only we ran government.
That would be so much better, wouldn't it? No, if I was in government, this stuff would be fixed tomorrow. But unfortunately, I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
Keep lobbying. Yeah, keep lobbying, pushing the governments of the day to do the right thing, whether that be NDP, Liberal, or even conservatives. Like, I don't want to view conservatives as necessarily bad here. Like, again, as we saw with Alison Redford in Alberta, the conservatives can do the right thing too. So we just got to lobby. We just got to make sure that the governments are listening to us, and we gotta change the discussion and change the attitude that society overall has. Because the reality is, I don't think Canadians are mean. I don't think Canadians are even fully aware of how bad things are. Like, I've seen polling done that showed like 90% of Canadians support a Canada disability benefits. So I generally think Canadians, we're a progressive, open-minded bunch for the most part. And so all we have to do is we need to remind Canadians what the actual state is in this country right now for people like us. And when we do that, I think we'll see an increase in people that are going to push for change.
Well, especially when when it affects people's lives, like anyone can become disabled. They're born as with a disability. As they age, I mean, they're going to get more disabilities. And I think
Absolutely.
as society sees this, I mean, the pandemic had opened up a lot of issues in society, and all the inequalities going forward. And so having that, as the government calls it, the lens, which just drives me batty. But but if we use the lens on it and saying, hey, like let's focus on people with disabilities and saying, where are the inequalities here? How do we fix it as society? Where did we go wrong? Like what happened? I mean, I in my view, I just give everybody RGI, just boost up the income, give them RGI. I mean, make the ceiling unlimited so that when I say the ceiling, their household income, it should be based on the individual, not the household. And that way,
Absolutely.
so many things.
My sister and I shouldn't get penalized if she has to live with me.
No, and that's how,
And,
Syntheticus, that's what happened to me and my mom. My brother, my mom had brought my brother and I before we ended the show, but one of us had to go, one of us could stay. And the government said, that's this policy. And I said, policy? I said, but it was based on household income. And I didn't really advocate that much back then. I knew a little bit. And I said, well, but this is my income though. Like this is what I made, right? But it's based on household.
Remember Christy Clark's election platform?
consultations.
Election platform
Remember
was,
the consultations?
was family first. Remember that?
Yes.
Her family first platform. So
Family
is
first.
breaking up families a family first agenda?
So what I had said, because my mom had just got onto a senior supplement at the time, and so she applied for it was a Safers program for seniors, right? So the minister who was in charge of the federal program was my worker at the same time. Go figure. So we sat down. It was like almost like a conflict of interest, but not really. And my mom goes, well, before I was even on disability, well, Brent pays me 30% of his income. Oh, well, that's great. I go, okay, but what would happen if I got disability? Well, we would just give you a lump sum, and we would give you that sum of $325. $325. Well, okay, is that paying more than what you're paying now? I go, no, I'm paying less than that. I'm paying less. I was paying less than $325 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I said to my mom, well, I can give you more. But you know what the worker said? If you give her more, even though you're not on disability at the time, your mom will have to declare that, and it boosts up her income, her household income then. I said, what? Yeah, so based on now my income and hers. So when I got on disability, now it was combined. It was just under that threshold amount where I could still stay with her. I said, so what happens if I get more income than she does? Well, then it's going to get to a point where your mom's going to stay. You're going to have to go. So
I think the one thing I'd say here is that Canada generally has the social programs that are already intact and already in place, and that what needs to be done is they need to be modified.
Yeah,
we don't necessarily need dramatically new programs. We've already got a welfare state in this country that generally does function. They just need to be better invested, and they need to be tweaked.
Yeah, to 2023 standards going forward.
Yeah.
Not
Or
back in
2023 standards, Northern European standards would be my ideal.
Yeah, not back in the
Take care of our people.
Yeah, or KHK wages. But yeah, well, thank you again. I guess we'll go to some closing comments then, just to summarize this session, and I'll definitely get Neil to reach out to you, and we'll get you back on very shortly in the near future.
Oh, and if you guys are interested, I've got a couple codes for Blue Sky. If you guys would like to try Blue Sky in the future,
okay,
I can give you guys a code. I've got 2 of them, I believe.
You can just email it over to Neil.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and definitely, and then he can let me know too, and definitely, we can we'll definitely stay in contact for sure, and I mean, you've got my email address too, so definitely stay in contact with us, and we'll have you back on. And I guess I'll start.
Everybody remember to wear your orange shirt for
Truth
and Reconciliation tomorrow.
Very important day. It's a statutory day of it's just almost make me tear up there. I'll get Neil to mention about what the day is for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's Truth and Reconciliation Day for Indigenous, especially to do with the murdered women and children, the children that were in the residential schools. So it's in recognition of that. So if you don't have an orange shirt, you can wear a red. I think too. Red is fine too, but try to wear orange tomorrow.
It almost made me tear up there when I think of all the sad situation that didn't have to happen for the Indigenous children that were never came home. And,
I mean, they have that. Remember, they had all those shoes up on the legislature steps there.
Yes,
I mean,
I saw them.
Really powerful. Really powerful.
I saw that one day when I went by there, and it was just like I stood there.
That's funny.
Yeah.
The program I exist in is providing me housing. The lady I live with, she did the work, volunteer work for that.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really powerful thing when you look at that and you're like, wow. Yeah.
I stood there and I looked at the shoes and I just visualized the children, and it's like a moment of silence, and I think it's so important that regardless of how people's views are, on how they feel about that day, the day of recognition, of recognizing the children for who they would have been growing up, to who they probably would have been really good citizens of this country, right? We got to look back and say, why did this happen?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is we live in a cancel culture nowadays.
Yeah.
Like everyone wants to cancel everything out. Like cancel culture is everything. And to me, it's so important to remember our history. To remember, like we can remember good things, but it's also important to remember bad things. So, like, we need to learn from our history, even the bad history.
And what can we do better going forward? Learn from mistakes going forward. I mean,
I often have I apologize. I often have a term I always say with regards to this. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and it will continue to rhyme if we forget the lessons of history.
Right.
That's right. It's like Remembrance Day, lest we forget. Right. And my grandma fought in the World War. My mom was in the war. She was helped doing nursing and stuff in the war. So I learned a lot about things going forward. What we're going through now, like we're going in a recession. We're actually in a recession. I think we're going to go into a deeper recession. My mom predicted this years ago, and I argued with her. God rest her soul. She's right. But she said, Brent, learn going forward. Learn to be very responsible economically, and just go with the flow. You just have to go with it, but stand up for what you believe in. And I always stuck with those words: stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believe in. And with that being said, Neil, I'm going to pass the mic over, but I want to thank everyone for watching today, for tuning in. This has been a great show, having our guest on, Syntheticus Canadiensis. Say that a few good times. I love that.
Syntheticus Canadiensis is how I pronounce it.
I love it. I love that handle. It's rhymes. It's groovy. It's
getting very, very busy. It's getting very busy at Mouse right now. I feel like a train station, so we gotta sign off here now.
We got a block. Okay.
But it was a great show. So thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks.